Hey there everyone, and welcome to DnD Horror Stories with DnD Doge. Have you ever started a Dungeons & Dragons game, only for one player to slowly reveal that they're a creep? Well, the poster of this story did. To the post. The Story of Doug, Part 1, by Reddit user, Historically Mr. Me. This is the story of the campaign that made me want to quit tabletop RPGs completely. A couple years ago, I was invited by a friend of mine to join a D&D campaign that a friend of his was setting up. The setting was some far-off realm that had been caught in the crossfire of a civil war between beings so powerful they were basically gods. The party was a group of all clerics that had come from across the realms and faraway lands to retrieve something on behalf of their deity, only to find themselves bound together in a quest to stop the BBEG from reawakening these titan-like superweapons that had been hidden away at the end of the Heavenly Civil War. Along the way, each of us were supposed to find our holy MacGuffins, which would, in some way or another, help us in trying to defeat the BBEG. So here's the cast. Since we were all clerics, I'll use fake names to try and delineate between us. Me, a high school teacher relatively new to role-playing games, playing a half-elf grave domain cleric of Sihan 9 Moonbow, who was sent to find a monocle called the Undertaker's Eye. More on that later. Rick, a former teacher turned police officer, which says a lot about our schools, that got me into RPGs. Playing an older dwarf order domain cleric of Tyr, sent to find the Armor of Judgment. Kit, not actually sure what Kit does for a living, but it involves working from home. She was our DM and host. Carrie, a waitress/student, and an absolute delight. Just one of those people that energizes every room they walk into. Playing a human light domain Lathander cleric, sent to find the blood of Lathander himself. Now, our story will begin as I introduce Doug. Doug was Kit's brother-in-law, who worked at a local gaming store, and was a self-proclaimed super nerd. One of those guys that had a habit of talking down to everyone, or at least sounding like it. When we set up for our very first session, Doug was originally going to play a Goliath war domain cleric. This changed, however, when he showed up to the first session with a changeling trickery domain cleric instead, saying he'd been inspired at the last minute and was really into this new character. Kit was obviously annoyed because she had spent a lot of time weaving our characters' backstories into the plot, and now had to rearrange a bunch of stuff on the fly. She decided to work with him though, and asked for his new character sheet, allowing us to roleplay introductions while she looked over the information Doug had brought. Our characters met on the outskirts of this war-torn land in a one-size-fits-all temple that served all pilgrims, regardless of which god they worshipped or served. Right away, Doug gives us a glimpse of what's to come as he meets Carrie's character, choosing to inhale deeply through his nose and tell her that she smells delightfully repressed. I'm not even sure what that's supposed to mean, but still, ew. We all kind of uncomfortably laughed it off. I was new to roleplay and just chalked it up to the character is weird, not necessarily the guy. Then we move on to Rick, who introduces himself and is met with an immediate, just my luck. I don't remember what word he used, but it was basically a racial slur for a dwarf. From Doug. When it's my turn, I get called a knife-eared half-breed, and we all just kind of look at one another, trying to figure out what to do with this creepy racist changeling we've just met. Kit seems a little thrown off too, but we get underway, facing our first combat, in which we learn that holy people aren't really appreciated in this land, and we decide to stick together to try and find our holy MacGuffins. Fast forward to the next weird moment. It was a couple sessions later. A couple in-game weeks have gone by, and Doug had actually been absent from the previous session to this one, though he had taken to the annoying and weird habit of referring to Carrie in-game as the female. Again, just weird. We'd come to a half-rebuilt town, and donned disguises so we wouldn't be attacked or attract attention as god worshippers. We end up in this tavern, following a lead on where to find Rick's MacGuffin. We get a mission to this cave where the armor is, and decide to stay the night at the tavern before heading out for it. At this point in the campaign, Carrie's cleric and mine had been flirting with one another and becoming very close. They spend the evening drinking and dancing together before the party all heads off to bed. That's when Doug passes a note to Kit. Then stuff gets weird. Kit. Okay. Roll a stealth check, I guess. Doug. 19. I carefully slip into Carrie's room, assuming the appearance of the grave cleric. Me and Carrie. I beg your finest effing pardon? Doug, undeterred. I get undressed and gently brush Carrie's cheek to wake her up. Oh, for F's sakes. Why do people always try to turn D&D into an SA fantasy? This dude was straight up trying to Revenge of the Nerds this character. Carrie, getting pretty uncomfortable out of character. I ask him what the hell he thinks he's doing. Doug. That's metagaming. Your character would have no reason to doubt that I'm OP. Carrie. Yeah? Backstory check. Please DM. Kit checks her notes and says, yeah, so Carrie's cleric took a vow of celibacy when she was a teen. Stands to reason her and OP's cleric would have discussed that, given how close they've become. Doug at this point is getting visibly frustrated as he asks, then why even let me sneak into her room? To which Kit replies, I thought you were going to rob her, not try to SA her. Having decided he can make this situation even more uncomfortable, Doug decides to pick up his D20 and say, well, I'm here now, so... So, even after all of that, Doug was still going to try and go through with it? Luckily, Kit says no. As DM, she's not going to let him SA another player's character, so he has to do something else. Well, good on Kit for that. She did what any DM should do in that situation, and put her foot down when it came to that crap. Carrie is looking very uncomfortable now, and gets up from the table, saying she's going to the bathroom. In truth, I think she just wanted a breather. Doug decides to leave Carrie's room without even attempting to explain himself, reasoning that my character will be left to deal with the consequences. Morning comes, and Carrie, now back at the table, says, I'd like to go ask Doug what the hell he was trying to pull last night. We all jump as Doug slams his hand down on the table. I was in the form of OP. Your character wouldn't know it was me. Carrie. DM, did Doug mention changing his clothes before sneaking into my room? Kit. No, he did not. Carrie. So, given that we've been traveling together for weeks, I'm going to say that my character would be familiar enough with your style of dress to tell the clothes you left behind last night are yours. Ah, now Doug didn't think of that little detail, now did he? Rick and I laugh, and Doug gets so pissed, he just gets up and leaves the room, slamming the door hard enough to knock a picture off the wall. Believe it or not, Doug does not get better from here. So if you'd like to hear how much worse he gets, and about where this ends up, let me know. Now, it is hard to imagine that Doug could get any worse after that, but luckily for us, OP did post an update to this whole situation. Though before we dive into that, and backed by popular demand, here is Ziggy to request that you like the video and subscribe.
Yes, like the video and subscribe. Yay, a banana.
He's such a wise kitty, so you should listen to him. But with that, let's continue to witness this train wreck by the name of Doug. The story of Doug 2, the Re-Duggening. So, in the next session, after Doug's cleric tried to SA Carrie's and frame my character for it, Doug shows up a few hours late to the table, We're in the middle of looking for Rick's divine MacGuffin, and it's brought us to this long-forgotten dwarven mine. After Doug's sudden angry exit from the last session, and his absence at the beginning of this one, Kit explained it in-game as Doug's character having just run off, rather than answer for his attempted crime. When Doug returns, and is unsatisfied with this explanation, saying that instead he was off completing a mission for his goddess. Out of character, Doug attempts to explain his attempted assault on Carrie's character by saying something about how in a religious-themed epic adventure like ours, such an incident would fit right in. He cited Greek and Roman mythology as justification for this, and I'm really shortening his rantings here. But essentially, it was, if Zeus or Jupiter can disguise themselves to take advantage of women, so can my character. Well, that's just stupid. Side note, I admit, we should have seen through his BS and kicked him from the group, but we more or less left it up to Carrie, who I think felt uncomfortable making that call by herself, so Doug stayed in. In the aftermath of all of this, Rick and I recognized this as the moment where we messed up, and we would later apologize to Carrie for putting her in that situation. Honestly, thinking back on all this has made me feel shittier than I thought it would, so I'm just going to speedrun the rest of Doug's antics. Though before I do, I just want to say that the shame of all of this is that had it not been for Doug, this campaign would have been absolutely perfect. Kit did such an amazing job building this setting and weaving our characters into it. It also bears mentioning that we had a lot of fun in spite of Doug, but in the end, we should have gotten rid of him earlier. So here it is. In character, Doug spent the next few sessions referring to Carrie's character as the female, even though she asked him several times not to. But he insisted, "It's what my character would do." Well, it figures that Doug would be one of those players that use roleplay as an excuse to be a dickhead. Carrie's cleric and I kind of started a kind of in-game relationship, but because of my character's general outlook and her character having taken a celibacy vow, the closest to, quote, intimate that they ever got was stargazing while holding hands. Doug pitched a fit about this, insisting that that broke Carrie's vow somehow. Right, because holding hands is the same as sex. Doug is a frickin' idiot. Doug tried to ruin our character's relationship by once again trying to take on my form, though this time he was smart enough to steal my clothing. But Carrie outmaneuvered him by referencing stuff our characters had talked about in private, provoking another loud and obnoxious accusation of metagaming from Doug. So, after all of the fallout from the last time he did that, and even with the DM saying that that kind of thing won't happen in the game, Doug still tried to do it? He's not the sharpest knife in the drawer, now is he? Because he was a trickery domain cleric, Doug took to constantly trying to steal stuff from me and Rick's characters. Doug intentionally gave away my position during a stealth mission in an attempt to get me killed. He took to cursing at Kit, his sister-in-law, whenever he'd try something stupid and fail. And for his grand finale, around session 5, we were talking about bringing a 5th into the campaign, and Doug decided to prod Carrie about asking a single friend to join us. Well, that would just be a recipe for disaster. When Carrie's response was a diplomatic, but pretty clear, absolutely effing not, he decided to turn to me and ask if I had any female students I could bring in. Now, for those that don't remember, I was a high school teacher. I mentioned this to Doug, hoping that maybe he thought that I taught at the local community college. But he didn't. I don't remember exactly how he worded it, but it was some comment about anime that was so disgusting that Carrie just got up and left. Like, left all of her stuff at the table and took off. Rick, the cop, has a loud exchange with Doug that almost comes to violence, and Kit has to step out of the room because she is so mortified by all this that she's about to cry. Just as I had managed to convince Rick to leave with me, Doug makes a comment about taking Carrie's stuff to her, and I say this in all seriousness. I'm glad Rick was unarmed that day. The campaign ended there, and apart from a couple of one-shots, I haven't played since. I've carried a lot of guilt for not speaking up, and for tolerating Doug's behavior, even when I knew it was wrong. I don't think Rick played again either, and he unfortunately passed away last spring, and I hate that we never got to play together again. One bright spot, if there is one, is that Carrie and Kit started a women's D&D, Pathfinder, and Vampire the Masquerade group that they really love, so do with that what you will. Man, talk about a crappy way for a campaign to end, and all because of one douchebag. I have to give my condolences to OP for Rick's passing, as I kind of had the same experience. My best friend and I were in a game for one session, but he quit due to disagreements with the DM, which in my opinion were valid, as I quit that game a few sessions later. But then he was working on starting up his own game, and a few weeks before we could get it started, he passed suddenly due to an embolism, which, trust me, really sucked. Though, at least there's a bit of a silver lining in this story, as Kit started up her girls-only group, though maybe they could make an exception and possibly let OP join. Though in the long run, it still has to suck for Kit, seeing how she is related by law to Doug, and probably still has to deal with him here and there. I think we could all use another kitty after all that, as I find that kitties make everything better. They sure do love their treats, and if you would like to help me get them more treats, I'll leave my Ko-fi and Ko-fi links in the description. And remember, donations are always appreciated, but not required. But with that, it looks like we have time for a few more DnD horror stories. So let's get to one, where a dungeon master has an issue with a player that just keeps playing the same character. To the post. The same character traits over and over again. By Reddit user Connor Clashnord. This is a thing that really only bothers me, and I still play with my usual group. But after playing a lot of games with one of my players, I'm starting to notice that he only plays one kind of character, without much of a difference between them. It doesn't matter the setting, world, or tone. The character reactions and personality is almost always the same as the last one. It doesn't matter if we're playing a light-hearted, cartoonish style story, or the end of the world setting. His character is still going to be calling people bastards, describing blood on attacks, openly swearing like a sailor, threatening NPCs for no reason, or just not showing any sign of emotion, rather than being cold and unfazed by anything that happens. Other things that always appear in the characters are never showing fear against anything, ever. It doesn't matter if the character is going to be going through one of the worst parts of his life, or is a young mechanic, or a hardened warrior. He isn't going to show any signs of doubt or fear, no matter how dire the situation is. All of his characters are irreverent for no reason, most of the time talking down to NPCs without any reason to do so, other than being an a-hole, or thinking that maybe it could be funny. He's extremely cold against enemies, ultra smug, or in the cases of losing, going back to being a jerk to the enemies by calling them bad names, making fun of them, or making threats against them. What makes me realize all of these things is that my games are currently only 2 players, and me as the game master. Sometimes when taking breaks to play another system, I start to notice the same traits appearing in all the characters he makes. Even if I do enjoy my group, it does get tiresome after a while. Well, while that isn't that bad of a horror story, I can see how the same character every game could get a bit stale. It just sounds to me like this one player has a sort of comfort zone that he gets into while roleplaying, and doesn't have any desire to step out of it. So I would suggest that if it's bothering OP so much, that OP try having a talk with his player and ask if he would be comfortable shaking things up a bit. Maybe suggest to him to try and play a healing class or something, and maybe some new roleplay will come with that. But some people are just set in their ways. So if it doesn't bother OP that much, and everyone else seems okay with it, I don't really see the harm. But that's just my opinion. What do you guys think on this one? But with that, let's move on to a story where a dungeon master gives a bard a deck of many things, which leads to chaos and strife. To the post. Would I be the a-hole if I asked the player to get rid of a magic item? By Reddit user PrintSamzor. This happened last night, and I just can't get over it. I was playing a paladin, and the other player was a bard. The other 4 players are not important to the situation. We were going through what is essentially a magic seed vault, the place overgrown and filled with jungle monsters, which even included a parrot bear from the session before this. In this session, we were up against some kind of plant zombies, but they were on the other side of a broken bridge over a spike pit. We debated how we could get across. I was about to suggest that I cast Find Steed, and we have the steed leap across the gap while carrying 2 or 3 of us. Me and our rogue could take the plant zombies up close, while the casters hit them from a distance. I was going to suggest that, but before I could, the bard said they would pull from their modified deck of many things. They ended up pulling a card that randomly turned one of the zombies into an ancient black dragon, and we were all level 6 by the way. Needless to say, the fight went south fast, and I died, along with the wizard, the barbarian, and the druid. The rogue ran away and survived, but now, because of backstory stuff, the bard made some deal with a goddess to revive a few of us, but only the wizard and druid were revived, while me and the barbarian remained dead. The dragon even ended up eating me. Safe to say, I am not happy about any of this. The dungeon master said I might be able to bring back my paladin, but I don't think he would trust the bard after this, especially if they still keep those damn cards. I could make a new character, but who's to say that something like this wouldn't happen again? What I want to do is ask if we can get rid of that deck. I, however, can't think of a way to ask something like this without looking like the a-hole. I want to keep playing, and I love my group, but I don't think I can stay in this game if these cards are allowed to stay. So what do I do? Would I be the a-hole if I told the bard to get rid of the magic item that killed my character? I know it's an awful thing to do, to tell a player that they can't have something, but I don't know if I can keep playing it. Edit. I talked to the DM and told them how I felt. I explained to them that I wasn't trying to make any kind of ultimatum or anything like that. I just wanted that item gone if we can all agree that it needs to go. Long story short, we came to a compromise that the deck will stay, but won't be used all willy-nilly, because it is a life or death situation only thing. Honestly, I'm not really happy with this conclusion, but I don't want to push it. I do really like this group, and this was the first ever problem we've had. If things change, for better or for worse, I'll do a part 2. Edit 2. The dungeon master decided to kick me. I won't lie, I do understand their reasoning, but I'm still upset about the whole thing. I guess our styles just didn't mesh. It was getting crowded anyway, so maybe this is for the best. Wow, talk about a roller coaster of a story. First, things go wrong with the whole deal with the deck of many things. But then OP did the right thing by talking to the DM about their grievances with the whole situation. But just when it seems like they had come to some sort of compromise, the DM turns around and just boots OP from the game? If I'm being honest, it's in my opinion that the DM should not have given that bard player the deck at all, as I've heard how that deck can kill entire campaigns in one fell swoop, much like it sounds like it almost did in this instance, by nearly TPKing the party. It's just not worth it. So in my mind, I think it might be for the best that OP isn't part of that group anymore. 1, because the DM allowed that to happen to begin with, and 2, it sounded like at the end there that the DM would just keep adding new players to the point that it was getting overcrowded. Heck, that might be why the DM kicked OP to begin with and just used OP's grievances against that item as an excuse. But hopefully, OP can find a new game to play in soon, and one that they can play without worrying about the game breaker that is the deck of many things. But that is all I have for you today. As always, I appreciate all of you, and hope that your games remain horror story free. Until next time.